Hello and welcome to 7909. This is the first class that we're going to do in this course for Module 1. So today's course, lesson rather, is about data codebooks and data entry, measures of central tendency and variability, and measures of symmetry and kurtosis. All right, so let's get started, and you should have a copy of the PowerPoint in Moodle also. There's a set of lesson objectives here for you to review and give you kind of an overview of what we're going to cover today, as is just the simple outline view of the lesson overview. But we're going to start with data codebooks and data entry. So a data codebook is actually what you create based on a survey that you've handed out. You know, we all have surveys that we pass out to participants, and what we really want to do is be able to take their responses and put those into something that can be used by a computer program. And to be able to do that, we use a data codebook. So all of their responses are converted to numbers, and here's an example of how I've done that with this survey. You'll notice that here on this first page, I have 3 constructs. One has 9 items, one has 5 items, and I can't see how many are in this construct here at the bottom, maybe 4, I'm not certain. Doesn't matter, that's not the point of this. The point is to look at, okay, people have answered each of these questions. How are we going to enter their responses numerically into a spreadsheet? So your data codebook just takes your survey and provides a numerical response for their response. If they checked 0 times, you'll enter 0. If they checked 1 or 2 times, you enter 1. If they check 3 to 5 times, you'll enter 2. If they check 6 or more times, you'll enter 3. When you get down here to the second construct, you've got a different set of responses. Not important to very important. And if they chose not important, you put 1, slightly important 2, important 3, very important 4. Strongly agree and strongly disagree scales. Strongly disagree is 1, disagree is 2, agree is 3, strongly agree is 4. All of that information allows you to convert whatever response they gave to a numerical response, so you can do something with it in your survey, right, in your statistical package. Notice that I put the questions I'm most interested in on the first page, because if they're going to stop answering, I'd rather they stopped answering after they've answered some of these important questions, and I'm not as interested in demographics. If they skip that, that's okay. But I don't want them to skip these major questions, right? So I always put my demographic questions on the second page. But I've got response, numerical responses for each of these too. Male is 0, female is 1, and you're probably going, how on earth did she come up with these? Well, let me show you something. And you've got a copy of this in Moodle also. I have what I call a generic codebook. And in this generic codebook, I have decided if the response is female, I'm going to put 1. If it is male, I'm going to put 0. On race, African American 1, white 2, Hispanic 3, African American Indian 4, Asian Pacific Islander 5, multiracial 6. If it's yes, no, yes is 1, no is 0. If it's true, false, true is 1, false is 0. If I have something where they can check a box, if the box is checked, it's 1. If it's not checked, it's 0. So those are the kinds of things that I make a lot of decisions about and use my generic codebook for. So I don't have to recreate it every time. I can use the same codes over and over. See the strongly disagree to strongly agree scale? I've got the coding right there. So I always come back to this. So that helps you see how I went about coding the rest of these. We've got a yes, no down here. Yes is 1, no is 0. We've got grade and school and age. Notice that's a blank. Whatever number they're going to write in, that's what I put. The only ones that may give you problems is, say, kindergarten. I mean, first grade obviously is 1. 12th grade is, or senior in high school is 12. But you've got to decide on a number value for kindergarten. You're probably not going to be doing a lot of surveys with kindergartners anyway, but those are the kinds of decisions you need to make. And then I'm going to go person by person and enter their responses. So how did they respond to each of those questions? Whatever response they gave, that's the number that goes in the blank. So data entry. But then that data also needs to have some labels attached to it so that it makes a whole lot more sense when you get your results. So for instance, you want to tell what do those 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers mean. So for example, maybe you've got a scale from 0 to 5 where 0 is not at all and 5 is very much. You would enter the value 0, the label not at all, and add. You would enter 1, just a little for the label, and add, and so on and so forth. So those are the kinds of things that you can do so that when you come back over here, you've got values shown. The next thing you want to look at is missing, because you know people are going to skip questions, they're not going to give you a response. So you don't want to leave that blank. You actually want to give it a value. I use some multiple of 99. So if my data is not going to go as high as 99, my missing value is almost always 99. Sometimes 99 could be a value. So if it's going to be represented in my data, I'll use 999 or 9,999. You get the idea. And see, you come back here and missing has a label. Then we want to describe the measure. Let me skip forward one slide. That's this piece right here, nominal, ordinal, scale. So nominal are things like gender and race. There's no order implied, right? Ordinal is when there is some order implied, like strongly disagree to strongly agree. You notice that I put strongly disagree as 1 and strongly agree as 4, because that 4 represents the most positive viewpoint that you can have. So that would be ordinal type data. Interval is when you create a score. So let's say you've got 9 items and you've created a score for those 9 items. We'll see that again in a few slides down and talk about that a little more. Okay, you come back over here and now this entire row does not have everything on it. Let's see if we can find the slide where it does. Here we go. See, here we go. Pre-question 1. We've got value, missing, and ordinal for the measure. So all of that is laid out. All right, so creating scores. You know, there are a few ways to create scores. You can do summated, which is just adding them all up, their responses. So you know, people came through, they answered all 12 of these items. You add up their responses, their numeric responses, because right, you've converted these circles to a numeric response. Summated, it's added up. Or mean, it's added up and divided by the number of items that you have. But the thing about it is you don't have to do that math. SPSS is going to do it for you. I've given you kind of the places to click right here. So make note of that on your PowerPoint so that you can come back to it if you need it. But here's an example of creating a score. I gave the score a name. This is the pre-test communication score. So pre-com score. And I'm going to do the mean. I'm going to do the pre-questions 1 through 12. The easy way to do this is to type in the word mean, open parentheses, and then double click on pre-Q1 and then put in a comma. Double click pre-Q2, put in a comma. I'll show you this again in just a few minutes. But create a score for all your constructs. And then we want to get into analysis. So your output is going to give you 4 different columns. You really just want to use 2 of those columns, but let's look at what those 4 columns are. First, we want to know, okay, these people responded to a question, pre-Q1, right? How many people said, well, they didn't use all of the response options, did they? They only used 4 of the, was it 5 of them? 5 or 6? They didn't use everything. I think it was 0 to 5, so that was 6 responses, and they've only used 4 of them. And you see one person chose each of these responses for a total of 4 people who responded. 14 people didn't even respond to that question, so those people are missing. And then you've got the raw percentage, the number out of the full 18 that could have responded. You're never going to use this column, so try to just exit off of the screen for yourself. Try to never look at the column that says percent, because what you really want to look at is the one that says valid percent, because valid says out of the 4 people who responded, because that's really all we care about, is the people who gave a response, what is the percentage? So 1 out of 4 is 25%, right? And the cumulative is just adding those valid percents up to get to 100. So we can also look at measures of central tendency. So how is a frequency distributed? And you can look at 3 different things. Mean, and we've talked about that's the average of the scores or average of the numbers. Median, which is the middle score. And mode, that's the score that you see most often. You can also look at range. We rarely look at range. We actually look instead at minimum and maximum. And we'll see that on the next screen. Variance, again, something we just rarely look at. And standard deviation, which is the average difference between the individual score in a distribution and the mean for the distribution. So standard deviation, 1 standard deviation from the mean, 2 standard deviations from the mean, or it could be somewhere in the middle between 1 and 2, or between the mean and 1. All right, so range. Range actually looks at your minimum and maximum, and in this particular case, your possible minimum was 1 and maximum was 7, but in your data, the data that you collected, the minimum score was 2 and the maximum was 6. So the range was 4. 6 minus 2 is 4. Like I said, we rarely look at range, but we do often report minimum and maximum. And then standard deviation. 1 or -1 standard deviations from the mean. That's where 68.2% of your scores are going to fall. 2 standard deviations from the mean. It's getting a little more uncommon. 3 standard deviations for the mean. A lot of people, and I think they'll probably refer to this in your book too, if it gets out to 3 standard deviations from the mean, they consider that an outlier, and they'll often remove that score from the analysis and from the report. You can also look at symmetry. So symmetry is either skewness or kurtosis, and skewness is either positively skewed or negatively skewed. If it's positively skewed, your scores all clump back this direction, but you can remember that it's positive because the tail is running out in that positive direction, right? If it's negatively skewed, your numbers are skewing more in this direction. So let's say this is 0 to 100. Over here, they're skewing more toward the 0. Here, they're skewing more toward the 100. But you can remember it's negative because this tail is headed in the negative direction. So just use that to kind of help yourself remember. Positive skew is about where the tail is, but the numbers are back here closer to, say, 0. Negative skew, tail is running in a negative direction, and numbers are clustered more toward the 100. You can look at kurtosis. So if the number plots 0 to 100 and 0 to 20, all right, so you're kind of in the middle with 50, and then they're all kind of clustered between, did I say that was 0 to 20? Between 50 and the 20. You've got kind of this, if you draw kind of the plus sign, you see you've got on leptokurtic, you've got this tall, skinny cluster of scores around the mean, as opposed to the normal curve. And then platykurtic, it's much flatter, so it's lower, closer to the 0, and more spread out away from the mean of, say, 50. So if you're going to do analysis, you've got to have study objectives that are going to drive that analysis. Let's talk about these two objectives. So this first objective is actually written so that you can figure out what is the frequency and percentage of people who responded to something. Let me break that down for you. Types of youth leadership development training received by youth educators. So a group of youth educators responded to an item that said, what types of youth leadership development training have you received? They probably went down there and they checked. Remember, every time they checked, it was a 1, and they didn't check, it's a 0. So you can report the frequency, how many checked that they had received a training and how many checked that they had not. So frequency and percentage. The second one is actually about mean and standard deviation. Let me show you how that one works. Faculty comfort with and perceived usefulness of online and social media platforms for professional development. So a group of faculty were asked how comfortable they felt with online and social media platforms and how useful online and social media platforms were. This was a construct. Well, each one was a construct, actually. They had a set of items for comfort and a set of items for usefulness. And they took those items and they created a mean score. So now we know that we're going to, once we get a mean score, we're going to report the mean and standard deviation for comfort and the mean and standard deviation for perceived usefulness. We'll look at that a little closer. Let's actually move into SPSS and conducting some analysis. And you know, I think what would be most useful at this point is if we just flipped over to SPSS and did this. So, let me get out of this one. Did I get out of it all? No, here it is. Okay. All right. So, this is data view. See, we've got everybody's responses entered. So we got 25 people who responded to this survey. We got all of their responses coded into the spreadsheet. We flip to variable view. We can see that we put a value in for each of those numbers. We can see we told it 99 is missing. I didn't actually do the measure right. That actually should say ordinal, right? Let me show you how we can fix that. I can get my arrow to come, there it is. Okay, nominal. So we're going to change nominal to ordinal. It's just that easy. The other way you can do it, go down, see how nominal quickly highlighted, go back up, highlight ordinal, and hit Control-C for copy, and then highlight all of these, and let's see, is that going to be right? Yep, Control-V for paste. Now all of those are ordinal. Those are right. Grade is scale or interval. Age is scale or interval. Race is correct, it's nominal. There's no order. Member of 4-H, yes or no? Nominal, no order. Okay, so we've got all that. Let's do a couple of things. First, let's do something so we can look at frequency and percentage. So we want to describe the gender of the respondents to this survey. We don't know enough about it to be any more specific about the audience than that, right? Okay, so we're going to describe the gender. We're going to go to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies, and we're going to pull over Gender. We're going to display the frequency tables. And looky there, we got 13 males and 12 females. We have no one missing. Valid percent, 52% are male and 48% are female. So frequency and percentage, descriptive data about gender. Remember how we also talked about creating a construct? And we've got these 9 items, CBQ1 through CBQ9, that we need to create a score for. We're going to call this construct 1 because we don't know what this construct's about. So we're going to go to compute variable, construct 1. Let me delete this and just show you again how to do it. You type in the word mean and open parentheses. And then remember how I told you you can double click and put in a comma. Double click, didn't take. So you have to watch it. Double click, put in a comma. Double click, comma. All the way down. And close your parentheses because it won't work if you don't close your parentheses. Now just check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, they're all there. Yes, I have a name for my construct. It's named construct 1. Okay. Yes, we're going to change this existing variable. I'd already done this once before. All right, so look here. It even recorded what I did. It said I created a mean for construct 1, and it tells me which variables I used to create that mean. Now, when I have constructs, remember I told you we were going to do mean and standard deviation. This is going to be the kind of analysis we want to do. So let's go over here. This time, let's use descriptive statistics, descriptives. We've pulled over construct 1. And we want to do mean and standard deviation. We're also going to ask it for minimum and maximum. All right, so the minimum is 0.78 and the maximum is 2.33. What does that mean? Let's go back over here to data view. Scroll all the way to the end and look at there. The minimum value, we had 2 people who had scores of 0.78. The maximum value, we had 1 person who had a score of 2.33. So that's the minimum and the maximum out of that column, right? But the mean represents the average for all of those values in that column for construct 1. So let's go see what the mean was. We didn't want to have to add all those up and divide by 25, right? No, SPSS did it for us. The mean is 1.42. And I always round to 2 places after the decimal point. So 1.42. Standard deviation, 1 standard deviation from the mean is 0.38. So that tells you it's kind of narrow, right? You can already start visualizing in your head. It's very narrow. What's that going to tell you about your bell-shaped curve? I don't know. May not be very bell-shaped, huh? We're not going to look at skewness and kurtosis right now, though. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. It always likes to jump around, so let's go find where we were. so we got results. Well, now we want to report them, right? I usually report demographic results in a table, something that looks like this. And then I'll include notes at the bottom of the table that tell me something like, well, how many people did not respond to the survey. You'll notice in this one that they divided the age and the years of service into ordinal categories. They didn't collect it that way. They actually let them write in the numbers. So we know what the mean and standard deviations are for age and years of service. We report that in a note. All right. All of this is going to culminate in a midterm exam. And for the record, the final exam is not cumulative. So whatever we cover in the first part of the semester is on the midterm, and whatever's in the second part of the semester is on the final. Test review. Let's look at these. All right, you need to create a data code book. Look at these. And I'm going to pause for just a minute. And you can actually stop the video if you need more time. How would you code each of these responses? Okay, you can pause the video, but I'm going to go ahead and give you the answers. True is 1, false is 0. Remember when we talked about that yes, no in the data code book? We used the same idea. True is 1, false is 0, like yes is 1 and no is 0. Not at all important, 1. Somewhat important, 2. Very important, 3. Remember, it's like the strongly disagree to strongly agree. The most negative is the lowest number to the most positive is the highest number. Never is 0. Remember, a lack of is going to always be 0. 1 to 2 times is 1. 3 to 5 times is 2. And 6 to 7 times is 3. And if you have questions, look back at that generic code book that's in Moodle and use that to help you. Okay. So, on the test, if I ask you about the variable view screen, could you explain how to enter values? Could you explain about missing values? What about nominal, ordinal, and interval? Can you tell the difference between numeric and string? Which reminds me, we didn't even talk about that. Let's skip back a few slides and look at that right quick. Right here. So when we have things like a name, first name, last name, that's string data. And when we have responses that we've changed to numeric responses, the type is numeric. So you can use your numeric data to do analysis. String data like names, that kind of thing, you can't do anything with that in SPSS. You have to use that somewhere else. All right, so let's skip forward again. And then can you describe how to compute a score? Remember, we had a slide on summated and mean scores. Can you tell how to do that? Okay, on this slide we have a whole bunch of terms. What I want you to do is take your time and go through them. Use your book as a resource too. Use your PowerPoint as a resource. Can you define each of these terms? Can you identify examples of these terms? So if I said, identify the frequency in the results below, and I gave you a results thing and you had A, B, C, D identifying different parts, you would have to identify the frequency part of it. Or it could be something totally different in terms of identifying, but can you do that as an example? Can you compute these things? If I ask you to go to SPSS, could you compute each of these? Not so much your skewness and kurtosis, because we didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. Not range and variance, we didn't spend a lot of time on that, but those other things, yes, you should be able to find those answers. Study objectives. Can you identify an appropriately or inappropriately written objective? Remember how we talked about you should be able to read the objective and get out of it the type of analysis that you're going to do. Is there a target audience? Remember, the example I gave didn't have a target audience. The one that I gave verbally, not the ones on the screen. So my verbal example was actually inappropriate. So you would be able to find that one as an inappropriate example. Can you write an objective that's appropriate for descriptive analysis? One it is used to find mean and standard deviation, frequency, valid percent. So just like those examples I gave you on the prior slides, can you write similar objectives? If I gave you output, can you read and find the answers to specific questions? Like if I ask you to find the median for age, or if I ask you to find the valid percentage of people who agreed with a certain statement. Could you write a brief paragraph report about the results? If I gave you results, can you write a brief report? Brief, not brief, brief. Can you lay out the structure of a table to report results? All right, so those all are things to keep in mind for reviewing for your test. Come back to that when it's time for the midterm exam. Here's your assignment for this week, and all of the files that you need for this assignment are in Moodle. Now you will have to use SPSS, and in your syllabus it's going to give you links to either a free online version of SPSS for students, or it's going to give you a link to a student version of SPSS that you can pay for and download. I haven't looked at the price, but sometimes in the past it's been something around $100. So you can use the online version for free, or you can buy the student license, and it's good for a year. So those things to think about. So the assignment for this week is create a data code book based on the survey that's in Moodle. Enter data. There's 25 surveys. Enter that data into SPSS. Enter the data from the code book into the variable screen. Create construct scores for these 3 constructs. And then do the following analysis. And so there will be more information that will help you complete this assignment in Moodle. But make sure you keep your copy of your PowerPoint, because this is where a lot of your instructions and instructions on how to carry out this assignment can be found. Okay, if you have any questions, this week we're going to do it by email, but after this week we'll do some kind of Q&A so that in the future everybody can see what the answers to the questions are. All right, y'all have a nice week. Thank you.